Welcome to the podcast. Um, okay,
Hello, friends.
what were we saying? Um,
I was saying
oh,
flowers are really expensive.
yeah. Oh, that's hot. I had to let that cool down. My tongue will be burned.
Burned on my skin.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier about making, like not wasting a priority. So it just feels wasteful to spend, and like lots of money on something that just doesn't seem worth it too.
Mm.
That's really hard to do. It's like, that doesn't make sense. Like the frugality comes into play of like not wanting to waste or spend frivolously for the sake of like, you know, I guess doing the right thing with your money and being a steward, if you will, of your, you know, wealth.
I think for me, like I had to change it from thinking about money as money in the sense of currency, like financial currency, and into more of a okay, what is this gonna buy me in terms of experience or um prevention. Like I take vitamins, which is kind of a silly example, but you get what I'm saying. I'm like, well, maybe the upfront cost now will save me later. Or then thinking, I think mostly about experience though. Like, what is the money going to do for me that is spent? So even if I'm looking at, okay, well, my apartment is a little expensive, but it's like, yeah, but what am I paying for? I pay for safety, I pay for convenience, because it's really close to work, it takes me 5 minutes to get to work. And ultimately, when I was looking at making the decision, like, am I going to live at home for this next however many years while I work before I go back to school and save a bunch of money, right? I would have been able to save a decent amount of money. Or am I going to move out into an apartment all by myself and try to figure it out? And ultimately, when I write my rent check every month, which is, an automatic transfer of money that I have set up, but it's I just remind myself like I'm paying for the experience. I'm paying for the development of myself and the growth of myself, learning how to live alone and manage a place alone. And that is a sense of security to me in a lot of ways too, to know that I can be alone and I can be successful alone. And that's another aspect of security. Or then, I think about, okay, well, I'm paying for this food for Sirius or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, this is investment in him and I've committed to being his mama and taking care of him, and this is my honoring of that commitment that I've made. Or like I get a massage every 3 weeks, which I need for my labrum tear in my hip. It keeps me just going, but like it's not cheap, but I'm like, you know what, it's worth it because I need it to feel good in my body and I need my body to feel good to live.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it's worth the experience that I get, or it's worth whatever is going to happen from that investment. And so I think when I kind of changed my philosophy of money or changed my mindset around it from, all right, here goes, $100 out, I'm $100, less rich. But then it's like, yeah, but what experience did I get out of it? And how is that going to impact me moving forward? And I think thinking about money like that and being more intentional in that way has helped offset some of those anxieties
Mhm.
or concerns about spending money.
Yeah. I mean, because money's not valuable in and of itself. It has no intrinsic worth.
It's a
Um,
human concept.
it's like, yeah, I just think sometimes I try to play it out in my head a little bit to where it's like, okay, I like you said, the smart financial move financially, purely financial would be, oh yeah, live at my parents' house, work from home, save up money. And then I just like, for what? What's the end goal? And then it's like, oh, and then you can get metaphysical really quick. And then like, well, life is what you make it. But that's a good one because the financial move is to live like, let's live in your parents. But the move that's going to further your development is to get out of there and do your own thing and figure your life out. And
Mm,
so it's like, yeah, sure, it's not the financial smart move, but um, in order to gain experiences to move you along, like I guess long term, who knows? Maybe it is the smart, which I think it is. Like for development experiences come first, especially at this age. Um, and we're yeah. I mean, it's obviously a balance, but
Gotta leave the nest at some point too. So, but I think that there's a lot that goes into it too. I mean, I'm also like, okay, with my money that I pay for rent, I'm paying for my freedom in a way, right? To have a place that is totally mine. I live all by myself. So everything, I am the one that has say. Obviously there's some rules because I live in an apartment, but like everything is how I say it is. And so I'm paying for control in a sense. I'm paying for that freedom. I'm paying for a safe that is, or a space that is mine and that is quiet. And
Mhm.
that's also super liberating because, sharing a space with people can be hard.
That's true. It can be hard. Um, Even about just having a space and about finances. One, I think I may have talked about it last time too, but I'll only hear it in Christian circles, really. But um, the word stewardship,
Mm,
I don't really hear that ever anywhere else. But I love it because it's like these are the things you have. Take care of them. This is what you're responsible for. Take care of it. And it also keeps people from maybe overextending too. It's like, I want to make sure I do a really good job at taking care of either the keeping my house in order, keeping it clean, keeping it maintained, keeping my body maintained. Um, like the body is the temple idea of like just taking care of things that are under your domain, or and finances is a good one too. Like just but it's almost like just being responsible, but just the idea of like not wasting and taking care of things. I just love. And when you said like I have my own place, it's like, yeah, just orderly, I guess. They're just more orderly than chaotic.
yeah, and it's just a place. I think there's something so sacred in a sense of having that space that is clean and that, feels good, and that I think it's just ultimately it comes down to feeling like you have a home, a,
Yeah.
a true home, a place to rest and a place to reset and a place to whatever it is that home needs to be for you. And yeah, but it's interesting what you say about that because in terms of, just being a steward, I love that word myself. And I think of it sometimes in terms of like, how am I being a steward of our earth? Or and then it kind of relates to this is something else I wanted to talk about, but there's this concept in yoga, I guess, kind of from Buddhism as well, but it's called your dharma. And it's ultimately like your duty and your role and what that means for you. And I find myself often asking myself, or if I maybe this kind of even ties into what we talked about last week with, what's the better friend, the emotional friend or the friend of obligation. But I think about sometimes I'm running around or I'm doing something and um like for example, I had to Sirius's food. I went to like three different stores and they didn't have it. And I was like, what is the deal? I'm running around looking for it. And then I wasn't getting frustrated. That's a harsh statement because, I was like, all right, this is a good opportunity to listen to a podcast while I drive around, right? Make the most of the little minutes and be intentional with the time. But then I was like, no, this is part of my dharma. This is part of my role. Like being a good mom to Sirius, or, insert whatever example it is here. Like, um, even sometimes going out and taking care of the horses and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so much work, but it's like this is part of my role and this is part of what I do and what I've signed up to do. So I think that sense of commitment can also help and help you be a better steward.
Hmm. Yeah. I just think steward implies ownership and responsibility, and
Mhm.
that's kind of what it implies. Like, or stewardship maybe implies like, for the Christian settings, is like this is all of God's, and He's leaving it to you to take care of it for however long you're going to be on Earth. It's kind of like it kind of implies like it's nothing really permanent, um, and you're here for a short period of time, so just take care of it while you're here. Like it's not like the maybe it's a sense of not completely owning something, but taking care of it anyway. It's like you're borrowing
Yeah,
these things for the time that you're on Earth, and
very short time we're here.
yeah, yeah, it's like a good perspective. Like, you know, yeah, it puts, I think the word steward in my mind kind of puts it perspective a little bit into like eternity of like, it can go on and on and on, and you're here for a little blip in the span of time. So while you're here, take care of things and do the best you can with that, and it goes with like wasting and like trash, like you said, environmentally. You could speak about this too,
Absolutely.
financially, with your house, um, just anything that you own, anything that you possess that was given to you or whatever.
I think just to touch on that again, there's this quote I love, and it says something like, "We inherit the earth from our ancestors, and we borrow it from our children." And I think that that ties it so beautifully because it's true. It's like it's not ours. We don't own it. And also stewardship, though, I think is actually a really important concept with regard to relationships or
Yeah.
um whatever the relationship is, if it's parental or romantic or a friendship, but taking care of what what you have, and like protecting the relationship and protecting the other person. And um did you hear that?
Yeah. Was that serious?
No, I don't know what that was.
Probably ghost.
Probably a phantom. It's fine. Expecto patronum. um but yeah, I think that that's also something I've really been thinking of in terms of stewardship as well, is how it applies in relationships and taking care of what you have, because I think sometimes relationships can get neglected and then that leads to friction, um, which I guess also kind of ties into what we talked about last week.
Hmm. Yeah. I think being a friend. I think being a friend in the long run of duty and obligation is better. I think I'm like in the long run because I feel like most relationships start off like very fun. Ideally, this is like the ideal relationship of like building a friendship. You hit it off. First impressions are always you'd always want to be good. So sometimes they're not. And then there's a lot of fun, emotional, like energy. It's a lot of fun. You want to do things for people. You want to like hang out and do fun stuff. And then as the relationship matures, most of the time, well, I guess not always, but you can't. Some of those emotional states aren't sustainable,
Mm,
um, and settles into more of a um, you just like a friendship that's not full of energy. It's just kind of a slow like understanding and coming through for people in different trials of life. Of it's like this is a decision. Yeah, it's not like a I can't help but you know help this guy take him to the hospital because or whatever it is. I can't think of an example, but something like that. I think the duty and obligation wins in the long run. I guess with a good attitude though, because you can definitely do. I just think of like two types of people in my head of like the one type of person that's always just like, yep, I have to do it. It's what I have to do. Versus the people that at least have a slightly better view. It may not even like an emotion, it's just a slightly different mindset or attitude of it. Um, let's see.
mm.
An example would be um, I don't know if this is a good example, so I'm gonna hold off. But there's definitely one or two that pop in my head.
Oh, now I'm kind of curious.
Um,
It is. I know it's hard to break down in your mind though, right? Because obviously, ideally, in an ideal world, in a Pollyanna society, you
what was
have
that? Poly.
Pollyanna.
Was that
It's just
multiple Annas? Lots of Annas.
lots of Annas running around. No, it's like a like total fantasy. Everything is perfect type.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Um, I think you have the friend who. Oh man, I don't know if I want to make this claim yet, but I'm gonna make it and just say
Being recorded definitely makes me hold off on saying things that I listened to the last one. I was like, I have no idea what I'm talking about. I was like, Ben, you have no idea what you just said. You're just making vast assumptions about life, which I guess is fine. But just listening it over again, I was like, oh no, you can't be making those statements. You can't be making those statements because you're just gonna. Well, I guess I could, and then I get called out, and then I would have to formulate stuff. But
think though that's what we started this podcast. Like that's what something is so intentional about this podcast. Like we don't know. We're trying to figure it out. And these are
Mhm.
just conversations to bounce ideas around and try to come to some kind of conclusion to navigate this crazy world. But I think that that's just a big thing. And I love the honesty of that. You know, just like you listen sometimes and you're like, God, I really don't know what I'm talking
I
about.
have no idea what I just said.
But that's fine because, it's kind of like verbal, just trying to figure things out. And I know that I'm like, all right, let me just talk about this idea for 10 minutes. And you can be like, "No, I don't think so." Or we can kind of run with it. And then, in 12 years, be like, yeah, we really didn't know.
I know, that's what I'm gonna be like. Wow, it's good though because it's also like I've come a long way. That recording and tracking your progress, like I've done a lot of like learning a lot of different skills and stuff, and I always find a lot of satisfaction in looking at older videos. Um, and also, videos is a great way. It's a great technology to be able to see yourself in third person, like, oh, that's what I look like, you know.
Isn't that
Um,
weird?
which is amazing tool for um, what people learn through imitation. And so, like, you look at somebody and you see them. Let's say dancing, for example. I look at somebody and I see them do this really cool move. I'm like, okay, all right. So I do it, and I think that I'm looking like them. And then if someone shows me a video, I'm like, I have some work to do. I have some work to do. Um,
you
yeah,
know?
and with like swimming, like any type of form thing, yeah, it's really good.
No, I have a similar experience with yoga, right? I'm in a pose and then you look in the mirror and you're like, "Oh, wow, I really need to level my arms," or like my hip is really protruding. Let me push that back. But I mean, overall, I'm not a fan of practicing yoga in front of the mirror because I think it takes away from the practice. It makes it too aesthetic and it's not as internal. And I think
Yeah.
the internal experience is what's really important in yoga, for me at least. So I try to be very intentional about not practicing in front of mirrors. And now I'm comfortable enough in my practice to I'm not an expert by any means, but to know kind of, all right, we're in triangle, roll the shoulder back, don't collapse forward and think, oh wow, look at how much space I have. It's like, no, you're not actually in the pose.
Hmm.
But yeah, I know it is weird watching yourself back and I'm like, oh, is that what I sound like?
Hmm. I've gotten used to that, so that doesn't bother me anymore, but it definitely did.
It does at first. You're like, oh, really? Is that me?
There's this book called Total Immersion. I learned about it through a neighbor when I was learning doing the half Ironman,
Nice.
the triathlon. So it's a really good book on just learning in general, like the approach to learn a new skill. And in it, he actually talked about when you're swimming, a lot of people swim face down. They try to learn the front crawl immediately. And it's task overload. Too many things to concentrate on one time. So what this book does, it's genius, is it breaks it down on feel. So it's just you want to like you might not look the right way at the beginning, but you should feel right. So he's like, this is how it should feel. And so
Mm,
at the beginning, you start, face up out of the water. So it's not stressful. It's really relaxing. He's like, you just want to treat it like a yoga meditation.
mm,
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast eventually. And so you start off and you want to feel your like chest go into water kind of lifts up your lower body. And so like you just want to feel yourself pushing in your chest as a buoy that lifts up your other body. And then he just talks about this is how it should feel. You should feel effortless. It should feel smooth. It should feel like you're gliding on the water. So like instead of looking like, okay, should it look? And this is exactly the same way with yoga. How should it feel first? And then I feel like once you get that feeling down, then you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, it feels good. Let me try it this way. Oh, I feel it more because I think it comes through the feel first, and dancing as well. Like, yeah, I think it feels really important because that is internal. It's an internal thing that your body. It's Also helping you understand your body more when you look at it through the lens of feel, of like being aware of where your body is in
Ooh.
space.
Yes, like your proprioception and somatic awareness and
I like those words. Uh, so I say it again.
proprioception. That's just kind of like your like exactly what you just said, your understanding of where your body is in space.
I'm gonna definitely
And
put that soon.
something that's super cool that I've been playing around a lot with in yoga is just how hard balance gets when you close your eyes because you lose
Yeah.
that access to the world in terms of where am I in space. And even like little poses that, aren't, maybe they're challenging, but then once you work them enough, they get easier. But just playing around with closing my eyes in them and being like, wow, this is way more of a balance challenge now than it is when I can keep my eyes open and focused on your point of that just non-moving um, place on the wall or whatever. But yeah, for swimming, I really liked. I learned a lot about swimming, and I like to swim. But I liked this one that I read, and it was like pull the water towards you. You know what I mean? It was like shark fin your arm, and I just think that those visuals are so powerful because you can imagine, okay, I know roughly what it's supposed to feel like. I'm pulling the water,
Hmm.
or like your hand goes through the water like a knife. Like you just cut into the water, and I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. Okay, you're not like hitting your hand flat and then making it harder for yourself to pull.
Oh, I want to now. I want to
I
start
know, now I want to go swim.
swimming. Dang it. And I remember listening to or I think it's some Tim Ferriss thing, but he talked about like walking, and a lot of people, you think walking, everyone knows how to do it, but there are some ways that make walking better for you, better for your joints, easier on your knees. And he said one of them was like you pretend that you have bare feet, like not barefoot, but like big, heavy bare feet. So like the idea of like you really push down into all of your toes, and you're like apparently it's better for you or something like that. And there's like ways I've experimented it with running, like everyone can run, everyone has slightly different form, but just running, I'm like, okay, like what muscles am I using? Am I using my calves? Am I pushing off my ankles? Am I stretching my hip flexors? Am I landing too hard underneath me? It's like things can really get interesting when you try to feel the difference in your muscles. And um I guess I feel like yoga is kind of the best. I feel like yoga is the best one for really that, because it's like it's even more intentional. It's like that's the goal, is to feel that.
And there's so much, you can play so much with the poses. Like, what if I do this? What if I use a block here instead? Um, and I just love yoga because anybody can do it. Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to. If you need to sit in a chair, you can still do cat and cow seated or whatever. It just becomes super accessible. And but talking about walking, actually, I don't know if you've heard of this, but walking meditation is like a legit form of meditation, and you walk super slowly. You totally look like a zombie. And, like, it's all about like just getting into into the walking, right? And I think that's what I love about yoga and walking meditations is yoga asks us to really focus on our breath, which I don't know about you, but I take for granted all the time.
Meditation as well. I
And
like.
meditation, it's like I never think about my breath, and yet it's connecting me to this life all the time without me thinking about it. And then you sit down and you're like, okay, let me think about my breath. How does it feel? Where do I feel it? What's the temperature? Like, you know what I mean? You just can really settle into those sensations. But similarly with walking meditation, you really just focus. You walk super slowly, like I said, and you really just focus on the act of walking. How does it feel as my foot peels off the ground? How does it feel as my heel strikes? How do I feel it in my toes? Like, oh, my balance is really on my fourth toe, and just really getting into walking. Like, it's super fun on the beach. I love doing a walking meditation
Oh,
on the beach. You've got the sand, and you've got the ocean, so then you can focus on that kind of aspect of it. Like, now the ocean rolls over my feet or whatever. And it's super, I mean, and the beach is just so healing and so soothing in itself. It's like the perfect place to do any kind of meditation. But yeah, walking meditation is really cool, especially when you're in it for like, I've done it for up to 20 minutes, and and it sounds like, oh, 20 minutes. It's hard. It's hard to meditate for 20 minutes. Um, but to really focus on, okay, as my feet lift off the ground, or then that moment where you're only, you know, your foot is suspended in the air before it falls, and just really thinking about all those things, and then working your way up, like how does it feel in my hip when I go to step, or what is going on with my arm as it swings, and you know what I mean. And then you're just appreciating, like, and then there's like my brain that's keeping me balanced and keeping me upright, and even just like you fall in love with this miracle of walking.
Mm, that's true.
It's, you know, it's
It's
crazy.
it's like what we focus on really determines a lot of things, and all of these exercises of even like technique and swimming, and it makes you aware. It makes you aware of what's going on, and like walking bare feet is a great example. It makes you aware of what's going on, like, and it immerse. It's like driving a motorcycle versus driving a car. Which one are you more immersed in the world in? Motorcycle, even though it's dangerous, and that's another tangent that I don't want to go into, but um like walking barefoot and like the textures of like the everything, that can be an enjoyable thing. And there's so much enjoyment and like appreciation for things that just go unnoticed, that are always accessible. It's just we have so many channels coming at us that a lot of the quieter channels we don't hear. um and and so it's tough to get into that, and you have to be very intentional um, to get into that space with a phone in your hand, or with there's several days I just go through. I'm like, I didn't think about this at all. I didn't think about a breath at all. It's like crazy. It's things just go unnoticed, and the it's just a forced, I think, just attention and focus are just so powerful. And um and like the crazy part is it's all there. It's not like anybody's limited, like, oh, I don't have the money. I can't think about breathing and enjoy that experience, or like stretching, or like it's all there. It's all there for everybody. It's the low hanging fruit that um I guess nobody goes to and picks, but it's there.
It's there, and it just it for me at least, when I'm really good about it, you know, it's a practice. Everything is a practice. But when I'm really good about it, I also feel that it starts seeping into other small moments. I'm like, wow, like that's a beautiful tree. Or, you know, like I look, like even the other night I was driving, and gosh, the sky was just breathtaking. Like the sun was setting, and it just looked like brush strokes all across the
Mhm.
sky, you know, with like all those pinks and oranges. And I just was like, I'm just gonna appreciate this. I'm not gonna, like, you know, just kind of being present. And I think it is kind of like a exponential effect. Like I think when you get better at it, it is more able to seep into other parts of your life. Like um even I try to always be super respectful and aware of the moon. Like the moon, it just, I'm in love with the moon. I think it's magical. It's just this amazing like night light in the sky. And especially like the full moon, I just really try to make it a priority, or as the moon is in its fuller phases, just to like be outside that night, like not even for a lot, just like for 2 minutes, and just appreciate the moon. Because I find the moon very grounding, because it's always there, it cycles, you know what I mean. Like there's so many analogies with the moon of like, you know, you don't have to be whole in order to shine, and all those like cute little things we could get into. But and just how, you know, she keeps coming back. And I think that that's really beautiful. Like I have a plaque in my apartment that says it's just a phase, and it's all the phases of the moon.
Oh, that's good. That's
And
good.
I love that, you know what I mean. And I think it reminds us, kind of like we were talking about earlier, of non-permanence. um but that, you know, we can cycle, and I think that that's really cool. But yeah, man, it's hard. I even have tried really to be like, even with my cup of coffee, you know, like I'm really gonna commit to my coffee, like the first sip feeling, and how does that feel? Or even like what I noticed that I'm really bad about, and I don't know if this is the thing for you too, but I'm really bad about eating and like scrolling through social media, or scrolling through something, like not really sitting with my food and just eating. And then like apply meditation to food in general, like really focusing on your food. Wow, this bite is whatever texture and whatever flavor, and now I'm getting some of this, and you know, whatever. Like it's just, you don't even really get the richness of something as simple as eating, because we're so
Mm,
distracted.
mm, yeah.
I don't know if that's something you've played with at all, but
I have. I definitely because it's just like anything. You can really dive into something and really notice the nuances. Um, but a lot of times, in order to, well, this is with any skill too. Like, like even now, like so, I can't really appreciate uh, jujitsu and all its fullness based off of my ignorance. So
mm,
it's I have to spend time with it. I guess it goes back to cultivating. So I have to spend time in the scene and learning the moves and having appreciations for how difficult it is for these combination of moves, just like it might be difficult for me now to understand the combination of flavors in a food sense. Um, but there's also something to say about like not having to think too much or strive too hard as well. So it's a balance for sure.
yeah, like sometimes you need to just kind of quiet the mind a little a little bit and not be so like, wow, this fight I'm getting this or but I do think ultimately like especially if you're I think if you're hiking in the woods or something, I think that awareness and appreciation, like I'm always looking at trees, like so interesting, right? Trees are just amazing. You look at trees, like why did it, grow two different branches here? Or, sometimes you see the curved trees and it's like, how does that even happen? Like, how do you grow curved? And oh man, there's just so much fascinating stuff with the forest about like how trees decide if they're gonna let the other tree live or if the tree isn't worth
Do they
it.
decide or they just grow mindlessly?
There's a lot of science that it seems like they decide like who they're gonna share resources with and
Ah, I love this. I'd love to see that. That'd be cool.
it's super cool. I'm reading this kind of mind-boggling book. I've had to step away from it just because I was like, wow, okay, I'm really thinking way too much and I need to get to the forest as an escape, not as a like more
Analyze this and figure out what's going on.
more
Complexity of trees and how they interact with each other.
but something about earlier, like when we talked about, the body as a temple and respecting the body. I think that kind of a breakthrough thought I've had lately is just how that translates into boundaries and how even boundaries, I think we think boundaries are like, I think it kind of is a word with some negative connotations. Um, Maybe I take that back. I'm not sure. I think it's just a powerful word. And, but I saw something and it was like talking about having boundaries for yourself. And it was like even something as simple as going to bed at the same time or having like a bedtime routine is a boundary and like a way to take care of yourself. And I really appreciated that because I know for me, the time I go to sleep is like so all over the place, which is something I really need to work on because
Makes you
we
feel
know
better.
it makes you feel better and your brain likes to know what to expect. All right, at 11 p.m., we're shutting down.
And that's, I think, why we love the weather. So a lot of people love the weather. A lot of people love the moon, love the sun because it's a consistent pattern. Consistent
Exactly.
thing to go on, and you can predict and make decisions appropriately based off of reliable information. Now, granted, the weather man is never going to give you reliable information. I think we all know that. But still, it's something to talk about and look forward to in the future and kind of gives you like the hope of, oh, it's going to be sunny today or.
What's so interesting though about the weather in a sense, and I guess aside from the sun and the rain, but like we look at, oh, what's the high and what's the low? And it's like it doesn't really change that much on a day-to-day basis. It's
Yeah.
over time it changes, but like, yeah, so maybe it's 81 today and it's 79 tomorrow. Like, is that really meaningful information? Am I gonna
Yeah.
dress any differently? No.
Yeah. I never look at the weather. To me, it's just not as interesting. And I just know that it's not going to change what I do. Now, if it does, then I would look at it, but pretty much every time it's just like, well, I'm gonna do it anyway. And so I don't really need to see it. But it's for some people, it's more of an entertainment aspect of it's part of their daily ritual. It gives them that consistency of
Hmm.
you know. So, but boundaries. It kind of goes. I want to try to segue this into what I wanted to talk about today, which was inclusivity. Because that's a form of a boundary. Like you're inside or you're outside. Well, inside what? The boundary, or like whatever it is, inclusive and exclusive. And like uh, the culture really promotes inclusivity now. Um, but it's hard to define what I feel like it needs to be defined more. Because like you can be uh, like inclusive. Let's see, for this podcast, I'm not going to be like, guys, I'm not doing a podcast. Like everybody, come on, we'll have 50 people and we'll try. It's like, no, that doesn't make sense. Or like, you know, including people to play soccer during your basketball game. Or like it's like some things like including like some things that just doesn't make sense. So like you have to have rules in place and a system in place often before you can include people for it's going to be an enjoyable experience. So another thing that's in my own personal life is like I really enjoy dancing, so I want to invite people to go dancing. So I want it to be inclusive, but I also have to think of just about like logistics of is it going to be a fun time if they're going to come and they're going to feel like they don't know what they're doing and at this dance hall and it's going to be intimidating and they just end up not doing it. It's like, well, I'm being inclusive, like, hey, come on down, but it's not the right setting. There's like they need to be it, go into like maybe a more quiet, reserved place to learn and practice or whatever before they feel comfortable in a big setting.
Hmm.
Um, and then I don't know. It just seems like um, hmm, there's a few things I want to say about it, but I can't find the words at the moment.
Yeah, I think then you're thinking about, okay, is it going to be a fun experience for them, and is it going to be a
Or
fun
me.
experience for them, for me, right? And is it going to detract from what you're trying to get out of it? Because now instead of just focusing on the dancing, you're focused on, well, are they having fun? Do they want to be here? Are they bored? Whatever. And then you're not as able to focus on the dance, and ultimately you're there to get better at dance. So then it's like,
Well, and not just that. It's like it's also it's just I feel like that's the main goal is to have a fun time. And so when you're bringing all of these variables or whatever, it's just like um, the goal is to want to make people have an enjoyable first experience, so then they can feel included after. But you can't really, I guess, I can't really force people's interests. Maybe that's what it is. So it's just like now I've realized, what it's like. It's I'm going dancing or whatever. Feel free to come, but it has to be, I guess, their decision instead of me trying to sell it.
can't lead a horse to water and make it drink.
Uh, you can't.
No,
Horses don't do that.
there's a reason it's a saying, believe me. You're like, why won't you drink, please?
Horses.
Uh, um, yeah, I think that's interesting. I'm thinking about how it relates to me with even just like going for a walk and inviting people, like, do you want to go for a walk with me? But this is another place I've had to learn to kind of put my own ego aside because, right, to me, I'm like, I love walking, go for a walk every day, some type of walk. Sometimes it's, like yesterday, it was like a 3 hour walk, and some days it's a 30-minute walk, but I get for a walk every day. And right, I love it. I love walking. I'm like, whatever weather, kind of like we were just talking about, even if it's pouring rain, I'm gonna go for my walk. I'm gonna come back soaking wet, and I'm probably gonna drink some tea to warm up, but I'm gonna go for my walk. But then sometimes I invite people on a walk, and to me, I'm like, walking is great. It's one of the healthiest forms of movement we can do. Slow impact. You move your joints, you're lubricating everything, you're moving your blood, you're outdoors, you're breathing fresh air. Like, I just have my pro list for walking is way longer than my cons list. But then for some people, they might not like walking, which is a very foreign concept to me because I love to walk and I could walk all day. But then also respecting, like, okay, well, this person, even though I would love for them to go on a walk with me and I would love to spend that time with them, but then it's also this change of mind of, well, at the same time, I've offered them to come on a walk with me and to spend time with me, and then they've chosen not to. And so this is something I've had to work on a little bit is like, okay, so maybe someone wants to, their idea of spending quality time with me is watching TV. Maybe I don't find that super fulfilling. And I want to go for a walk. And I want them to come for a walk with me because I find that fulfilling. Then, like, how do you navigate that? Because they're choosing not to. So then, if I say, okay, well, I'll sit on the couch and watch TV with you, but then that doesn't feel fulfilling to me, that's going to lead to me not really being there and being like, oh, let me think of all the other things I could be doing. And then it's like, well, then why am I the one that compromises? And that's a whole tangent I just went on of something that I've
Yeah,
really been trying to
well,
rectify in my mind, and I can't.
that's the problem with me. I've noticed a lot of times. It's like, yeah, if they're like, yeah, just do what you want to do. It's like, yeah, but then you won't have any friends because you're not making any compromises. And so what I've noticed about myself is oftentimes if I'm wanting to do something with people over here, it's not really deep relationships over here yet. So it's kind of like casual relationships of enjoying each other's company. But I've noticed I don't ask like, "Hey, what do we want to do tonight?" It's like, "I'm going dancing." It's like it's an ultimatum. It's like, "I'm going to dance. You will find me here." And so the priority obviously is dancing and not hanging out and getting to know people, which I guess it depends on what your goals and priorities are. And I need to um, prioritize friendships a little bit more and finding people. But then it goes into where do you find them? You know, you find them usually where you're doing your common interest. So it can be good not like compromising so early on in our life to where we're going to be around people that don't have any common interests in us because then it's just work and work, work when it really doesn't have to be. We can be around people that, and for everybody, like being around people that the common interests are similar and it's easy or easier than it could be. But that,
I think those common interests just breed so much more. Well, right. I mean, obviously there's so many factors, but I think it just breeds more organic relationships. Um, but yeah, it's hard navigating that and figuring out, okay, well, then what level of compromising is fair? Like,
because you
I've
don't.
compromised now, 7 times. When are you going to compromise and come for a walk or whatever? Insert whatever activity here. And and then but then you've got to set a boundary, right? Because then you can't be the pushover
Don't
that
want to be a pushover.
always like, all right, well, you want to do this, therefore we'll do that. Um, yeah,
Negotiation.
it's so confusing. I like don't have an answer for this. This is just something I've been thinking a lot about over the past, I don't know, month or so. And I'm like, well, how do you navigate that? And how do you say and then also appreciating though, like, okay, walking isn't, maybe some extenuating factors, but walking isn't a hard activity. It's not like I'm asking you to
For
come
some people.
for some people, right? Like they're the people I'm
Most
thinking of,
for most people.
it's not a hard activity. It's not like I'm asking you to come to a hit class with me or, whatever, or a high intensity spin, whatever class. But I'm like, okay, then why don't you want to go for a walk? Well, you're also deciding not to spend time with me because I'm offering that. So then I'm like, okay, I don't know. I don't even know.
Over analyzing things.
I,
That's a good point though that you said about like hit class and stuff. I find a lot of most of the things I want to do are not easy. They're not like casual, like it's not a good environment to really like, you know, be with new friends that you know wanting to be more casual. So for me it's like, you know, there's a buy-in price and and that's the things I chase is the stuff that has a high buy-in of like anxiousness and nervousness and embarrassment and feeling like you're a beginner and like that stuff that's not easy. So that's the stuff I like to do. And so you can't really, it's hard to make friends outside of that group because you're like, hey, you want to come to jujitsu with me? You're going to suck for 6 months. You know, it's like,
and we're
you
not
want
going to
to,
be able to talk during
yeah,
it.
and oh, yeah, just because it's like, I just find enjoyment in it because it's hard, I think. And so I think the environment's huge. Um, somewhere in the Bible, it says like, it's in the Proverbs, it's just a statement about life, basically saying like the rich man has many friends. And because you're able to provide the environment that's conducive to a really enjoyable, enjoyable setting that can is easy. You know, it's an easy. You can be in a nice house, invite people over, and everything's fine. You've got everything situated, um, and like just providing the environment where it can be enjoyable, and like throwing activities and um, using money as a way to speed up the process of making sure you're gonna have a good time.
But do rich men always have a lot of friends?
No,
Because sometimes those are the people that are the loneliest.
true. Lonely. Yeah, well, I guess it goes to priorities too, because if you only think about finances and money and you put your friendships on the back burner, you're like that's the one thing that I was surveying some like millionaire's house. He had like 3 Bentleys in his Rolls Royces, 3 in his garage, just like super rich. And I was like, what do you do with it? Like when you start thinking about like, oh, I wish I had a mansion. I wish I had amazing cars. I'm like, what do you do with this stuff? Like who do you have to share this with? It's like, yeah, you have trophies in your car. You have your trophies, but like you can't do anything with your trophies. You can't do anything with these status symbols. I mean, it can get you things, but like in them of themselves, they don't really provide. Well, at least to me, they don't provide much value. So
No, I mean, I've never been a car person. Like, I if it gets you from point A to point B safely, I just don't attach much meaning to it. Kind of like we were talking about with clothing. I think. I mean, if I had disposable income in that way that I could afford things like that, I think I would choose different things to invest my money in than a car. Like I love my Honda CRV. I'll probably drive a CRV for the rest of my life. But I don't know. I think it's a balance of which we always say, but it's like how do you navigate the balance? And I don't really know. I think it's a trial and error process until you eventually figure it out. But you know, of doing things that you find enjoyment in that might be challenging, and then also being in an environment. And I think that's why like in college you make you can have friends because you have so many atmospheres that
and
are
time
in time that are
and and time to goof around. You
yeah,
know, like you said with trial and error, um, it's even just what we're doing right now. You know, this is trial and error of working out ideas. Dancing last night, I had a blast because towards the end, I found a fun dance partner that I really enjoyed with, and we were able to let loose and and practice and do trial and error. And then like with yoga, like you said earlier, trial and error of like, oh, what if I do this? What if I do this? You're giving yourself the freedom to make mistakes.
yes.
It's all there. Yeah, it's all there.
I think so much of life is just trial and error and just figuring it out because there's no paved road to this is the way, and everyone's got to go through making mistakes. And but I think that there is something really freeing and liberating in giving yourself permission to make those mistakes and saying like it's okay to mess up. And also detaching like negativity with it. Like maybe yeah, okay, maybe there's a step back, but overall, is it really like that high risk for some of these things?
Some things. It
Some
depends what we're talking about. Because there are definitely there's no right way, but I feel like there are some wrong ways out there.
Sure. I mean, I guess I'm thinking about lower stakes things or even
Okay.
but I think even to other things just to an extent. I mean, as long as it's not dangerous or posing a significant threat to you. Lately I've been saying this to myself a lot. I've been like, Ashley, you're not a tree. Like you got options. You can get up and move. You can change. You can not to say that trees don't change, and it's not a slight, but like even the other morning, okay,
Respect the trees. Mm.
it was 2 in the morning. I had been asleep from like 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. And I woke up and I was just wide awake. And I kept lying in bed and tossing and turning, and I was like, all right, it's 3:30 now. We're gonna get up and do something because you're not a tree. Like get up and move, change your environment. Um, but I think just remembering that too. I mean, I guess I'm kind of thinking about it in terms of careers, like as you look forward, and I'm like, God, I'm in my early 20s, so now I've got a long life of work ahead of me. Um, and then thinking about, oh, well, what if I don't like this job or whatever? But then also being like, yeah, but you can change. Like, I think there's just, and I think that's more acceptable in today's day and age than it was, 50 years ago. But I had this conversation with my friend a few nights ago, and she was like, there's just so much mobility and there's so many options. And like, you don't need to be scared of change. And I think that that's a really powerful sentiment that I've been working with and
Mm,
kind of reaffirming to myself.
that's good. Yeah.
Because it's like, even if I sit here and say, I'm not going to change, that's just not possible. Like everything's going to change. Change is the only thing we know for certain.
I mean, I think that's what we like is the feeling of certainty. Like we said, we like seeing the moon. We like the knowing that the moon's going to come around and the sun's going to come up in the morning, and we want to be the same way. We want to know that we're going to the same job for the foreseeable future. And it's you have to live with that level of uncertainty in life. Um, and
Hmm.
but it can be great. Some things you want to change, and that's like a beautiful thing of not everything is permanent. So you know it can be very hopeful as well, like if you're in a bad situation, knowing that change can happen, and that's really freeing and gives hope.
Hmm.
um, Even though, yeah, like holding on to some of those beliefs, like it can work both ways of like, oh, nothing lasts, like, it's too good to be true, nothing. Oh, and the other way, it's like, thank goodness nothing lasts because this is rough, so it's like the freedom of not getting locked in.
Mm. Yeah,
Like
exactly. I love that.
a lot, and we all, I mean, it's good to be locked into certain things at times. I guess that's how you get into your flow state, whatever, if like being locked into a hobby for an extended period of time, um, being locked into a job to where you can really get work done. But the idea of like long term, there's people go through so many phases of life and they change so much. It's just, yeah, being locked into an identity, you know.
Being willing to accept that that identity might change,
Yeah.
which can be scary because I was talking about this with my friend, and we are talking about being pre-med, and the pre-med identity has so much that comes with it. You tell people you're pre-med, and there's instantly kind of this little box, like, okay, science, studious, whatever. Um, and just as I was really asking myself, is this really where I'm going? Am I gonna pursue this? It's scary, when I thought about, okay, if I don't do this, like, that's a big part of my identity that I've given up in a way, if I chose not to do medicine, which I was really thinking about for a while. It's like, I don't know if I want to get into this. But then it's like, well, is the pre-med identity really giving me those things? Or is that who I am naturally?
Mm,
And
yeah.
and kind of asking myself, like, if I revoke pre-med, if I say to people I'm pre-law now or something, have I really given up anything that was associated with pre-med other than, okay, I took the MCAT for no reason. I'm not going to enter medical school. But like, were those really parts of my identity in terms of going to medical school? Or was it the characteristics that led me to be drawn to it? I don't know if I'm articulating this super well, but it got me thinking because she was also saying, like, if I'm not pre-med, then what am I? And
You're nobody. You're a nobody, Ashley.
no, that's not true. It's not the lens I see the world through. Um, but it's scary thoughts when you become attached to something, especially like pre-med, which got me through undergrad. I'm like, all right, I know that I'm gonna be a doctor, so I'm gonna get an A in organic chemistry or whatever. And it's like, I don't know, how much do these identities actually give us, and how much is medicine really dictating this, or is medicine really making you study, or is that just who you are? And I guess it goes different ways for people. Like, maybe, I just wanted to do well in biochemistry because I liked it and I cared about it. And I was like, this is interesting. But then maybe somebody else is like, well, I'm just trying to do well in biochem because I have to get into medical school. So
Hmm.
I don't know. I think then identity becomes such an individual thing. Like, how do you establish your identity, and how do you build it, and what is it, and how different?
It's a great. I love the question of identity. I mean, it's a classic one. Like, what is you, the self? Where are you? Are you in your mind? Are you in your body? Um, like, and then it brings up the question of consciousness.
Where is it? No one really knows.
Um, I saw another. This is another idea that I got somewhere from one of Tim Ferriss's people that he interviewed. Oh, is he saying like the idea of diversifying your identity, like just like your portfolio? Like if
Mm,
your financial portfolio, if one leg falls out, you have three left. And so people have a midlife crisis because they only have like one thing of identity. Let's say a woman, and she finds all of her identity in her looks and beauty. That's where she finds her identity, like all of it. And so when she gets older, time will slowly take away the youthful beauty, and then now it's like, oh gosh, what do I do? Who am I? Midlife crisis. And for guys, maybe it's, I'm sure there's a lot of other examples, but diversifying your identity into things that, it's like investing. You diversify your identity in things that will carry on throughout your life, so you don't have these existential identity things. I guess you could have them earlier by overthinking, which is probably what happened to me. But so like for me, what am I investing into my identity? Right now, I'm investing in things that are going to last throughout my entire life, or that aren't as perishable.
Yeah,
Um,
great distinction.
so like some things are, even like with skill acquisition, I think a lot of things like even basketball, that's a perishable skill. You're not going to be able to play it. Tennis and golf have a little bit more longevity. So if I enjoy, which I don't really enjoy those as much. So it's also just do what you want at the same time. But like I think dancing, that's something that it's not really a part of my identity necessarily, but it's more like an action that I can do. Like I'm a dancer. Like it's weird to say. It's weird to say like that's another thing. It's weird to say like, yeah, I like to dance versus I'm a dancer.
It's
Or
a
I'm a musician. I'm a dancer. I'm a triathlete. I'm a swimmer. I'm a basketball player. I'm a um, yeah. It's like how many things can you to pick up without being like okay, you can't concentrate on all of those. But yeah. I think my favorite form of identity is just saying I'm a student of life. I'm a learner. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a student. I'm It's the mindset. It's not nobody can. That's not going to go away. Um, and so that's one of the identities I like. And then they talk about a lot in. I've heard of this topic of identity brought up a lot in church. It's like you are who God says you are, and so that keeps people from having a very like negative view of like self-worth of like I'm useless, I'm worthless, I'm nothing. It's like well, and just in general, like having people believe in you and saying no, your view of your identity is wrong. You're actually this, you're this, you're this, and breathing in life and encouragement into people as well whenever they have a false view of themselves.
mm, that's yeah, that's really interesting about because I think those thoughts are relatively universal. Like I think everyone goes through those phases of what is my worth and what is my purpose and do I even have a purpose? Um you need some way to get through them and you definitely need some way to navigate them or I think they will consume you, those types of things. But it is very different when you change the language of even like a musician. I play the piano, I'm a musician. Or like I
Yeah,
like it's two different, like I guess ultimately you're conveying similar things, but it's two very different. Musician seems way more disciplined or trained to me, at least when I hear that word. That's what I'm thinking in my brain. But I think, yeah, forming an identity that, and that's what you said that I really resonated with, the student identity is so powerful because no one can take your knowledge away. Like that's yours. I guess, unless we're talking extreme things where you have those mental breakdowns and, where someone's breaking you down like 1984 situation. But
yeah.
what a haunting book. Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness, very
Uh,
scary.
George Orwell, like way ahead of his time. But I think so building those things that are not as likely to perish. I really liked that phrase. I'm gonna go write that down. That are more sustainable. I think like what you're talking about with dancing. So I think there's like, your identity that is less likely to perish. It's more focused on the individual maybe than finding it with someone else. Like, I don't know, I'm just thinking of maybe, you're really attached. But then, this is also important. Like if I'm really attached to an identity as a wife and then we get divorced, well, that's a big identity to give up. Um, Maybe that's not a great example,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Well, but then we have to remind ourselves, of course, that we're that things are going to change regardless, and we're going to be strong enough to get through it anyway. So really, it's like it's just the constant battle of trying to over prepare and figure life out ahead of our time.
uh,
And And like we'll obviously be well, not obviously, but we'll be fine. Like people go through this all the time. They don't, and it's like life will move on regardless. But it's just, I think it's just like a return on investment type idea of like, where am I putting my eggs? And just switching them up to enjoy life more. At the end of the day, that's what it's for. It's to really enjoy life and get the most out of this experience that I'm living by switching it up and getting. That's also getting a little taste of different things too. So
Oh yeah. I think so, absolutely. Just trying to experience everything you can, um, in a safe and healthy way. But I'm thinking about like what you're talking about with the identity and kind of who you are. And I think that there are those parts of you that are more permanent. Like I even
yeah,
look, okay, who was I in high school? Which granted I know wasn't that long ago. But I'm like, I still have a lot of those things. Like I'm still pretty similar in a lot of respects to what I value. I've grown a little bit, but I'm still like, yeah, compassion, family, things, So those are pretty sustaining. And then I'm thinking about sustainable hobbies, maybe like what you're talking about with dancing, cultivating sustainable hobbies that you're like, okay, maybe I won't be able to play basketball in 50 years, but you probably will. I don't know.
yeah, I probably could.
You're probably going to be fine. But I'm thinking about it in terms of like, that's why I've really worked to cultivate hobbies that I think will be able to stay with me throughout my life, like hiking, yoga,
Yoga,
cook,
yoga's a big one. And
Pilates.
cooking, yeah, cooking's a great, yeah. Hmm.
Because I'm like, yeah, when I'm 80 years old, I'll still be able to cook. My grandma does. I'll watch her. So that's kind of exciting, and then it's like, wow, now I've got a whole bunch of life to learn to cook more dishes and to get even more creative in the kitchen. But I think that's really important. But kind of what you were just saying about, our tendency to think a little maybe too far into the future and get a little
Yeah,
stuck in those cycles.
because it's like then we're just living for like the goal, like I've been just enjoying the goal, like oh, like it's a preparing mindset of like just in case, or and like when you really it's this is another little Tim Ferriss bit, but just in time versus just in case, where you're like we spend all our energy just like storing up and hoarding and it's hoarders, survivalists, the ones that store all. It's the same mentality. So we're just doing it more intellectually, um, storing up all this knowledge in case I need it. Um,
Right.
Storing up all these things in case, just in case. It's like
Like, and the irony of it though is then I go on these, thought experiments with myself, if you will. And I'm like, what did I really get out of it though? I mean, I think you do get things out of it, right? Being a thinker, like I've learned how to think myself through situations or whatever. But at the end of the day, if I'm dealing with a mega existential question, it's like, I can't answer this. There's no answer. Maybe it's fun to think about, but after a while, you kind of gotta, I think it
something
goes back to being in the present.
some things lead down a path that don't have any practical application. But oftentimes you don't know unless you go down it, like trial and error type thing. And I think also digging this deep also helps have a perspective shift of not getting too lost in like whatever. It's a good way to step back and analyze. But I love the question asking, okay, so either like what does this actually mean? Because actually is just basically saying, okay, what are you doing? Or can you actually do anything about it? Are you actually going to implement things? So having realizations is a great. Everyone loves having like, oh, that's what it is, or like,
Yes.
oh, I get it, I get it. And in that moment, oftentimes I've had so many realizations, and it's hard to act on every realization. But it's like, okay, well, how am I going to change this? Because unless I embody it and actually do it, it's not. I'm going to forget about it. It's not, and it's the same thing with dancing or any skill. It's like if I see somebody do a really cool move, I'm like, ooh, that's a good move. It's a good realization. And then if I don't immediately like ask somebody to dance and try to practice that move, or like bring ask somebody to kind of show me how it's done, and where I'm physically doing it, um, it's in 1 year out. It's like I forget about it, and
Yeah.
then it's like oh, I had the realization. I had that aha moment of like this is what I need to do. And then if you don't do it, then you're building up a thought pattern of like every time you have a realization, you don't act on it, or at least you don't like think about wanting to implement it. And so like with this inclusivity idea, I'm like, okay, what can I actually how is it actually going to change my behavior? Um, so okay, maybe don't try to bring people onto things that are not really beginner level or entry level. And if I want to be with people, I make them. I just don't try to throw ultimatums as much. And I say, hey, what do we want to do tonight? I would like to do this. So that's what I can work on. I'm not good at planning anyway, but um, like that's an actual thing I can do. It's small, and most of the time it's small. All of these you know, philosophical things that can seem so big and heavy, and then when you try to implement them, they just seem so small, like so microscopic. But that's what it's so fascinating. You're talking about heavy things like life and death and time and all this stuff, and you end up being like, all right, so I'm maybe not going to try to invite people as much if they're not seem interested. You know, it's like, how'd you get there? How did you get? Is that really useful, or just a way? Is it just a way to overthink and just because you like spinning? I like spinning my wheels in that level, and then at the end of the day, it's like I already knew what I need to do anyway. Well, it just makes maybe it's just like getting that level of certainty. You know, like talking myself into a level of certainty. Be like, okay, seems like the right move. I've analyzed it psychologically and philosophically. It's good. It's good. You know.
I think sometimes like also I'm like, all right, maybe my brain just needs a little bit more to do.
Yeah,
You
trying to.
know,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'm like, and granted, don't get me wrong, sometimes I don't think I can help some of the spirals and some of those, do 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 moments, but
Yeah.
I think that I think overall sometimes I'm like, all right, Ashley, less thinking, more doing. Um and even that can just come to like, all right, I'm really just going to focus on my breath for 1 minute. I'm really just going to commit to focusing on my breath and feeling my chest expand. Or now I'm going to place my hands on my ribs and feel how my ribs move. And now I feel how my low belly moves or whatever. You know what I mean? Like just really grounding, like, okay, this is an experience I'm having right now. But I know sometimes you go down those rabbit holes and I guess ultimately, I think some of them are definitely worth it. You have the realizations, then you either act on the realization or you write it down so you don't forget it.
Yeah, and then have a collection. I do this like I did this a lot last year. I had a collection of realizations either about myself or about life, and then I would look through them and be like, okay, which ones are like good, like which ones actually like I can actually use, and then kind of prioritize acting on realizations by writing them down.
And I think that's exactly what I do in my own journal. I have my highlighter and I'm like, oh yeah, this is what we're gonna
Well,
highlight.
or it's like for me, it's like this is which has really helped. It's really helped. It's like when you write things down, I'm like, good grief, I've said this 6 times over the past 6 months. I've said this 8 times over the like. I want to do jujitsu, and then like 6 months later, like 3 months later, jujitsu seems like a great thing. I want to do it, and then so I write down all the things. I'm like jujitsu times 5, dancing times 6, like, and so I'm like, okay, this is to the test of time, and I keep forgetting about it. So it's like I'll probably, yeah, I need to do it, or it's like if you keep those recurring thoughts of like, okay, like, I give more validity to the thoughts that reoccur over time. It's not just an impulsive idea of inspiration.
I love that because I do something totally similar. Or, I think I told you about how instead of thinking about time in terms of months, like, okay, it's October 1st. What's the month's plan?
Oktoberfest.
Oktoberfest. I
The
I've been
whole
doing around the moon, right? So new moon, you set intentions. Full moon is a good check-in point. All right, we're halfway through the cycle. What have you done about it? What'd you do about it? And like I said, just being already kind of in tune with the moon, walking outside and seeing it, that makes me think of this goal that I had. What
that's
have I
really
done?
I really I want to do that. Start incorporating that instead of like I would do like the Sunday, like it's a Sunday. Let me analyze, but
The
that
new moon
moon.
is on Wednesday, so have
Oh,
fun. Um, I know. So Wednesday night, I'll be there. Like, all right, here we go. It's a new cycle. What are we doing about it? And I think it's really powerful because, like, for the past 3 months, I've had the same goal, and I haven't really done anything about it. I've had phases that I've done stuff about it, but I'm like, all right, this is it. Come on, what are we doing? Stop messing around.
yeah, it's a forced priority of like it's a hyper focus, or it's a focused way of living life, and it's a fun way of living life, and it's a way to get a lot out, squeeze all the good stuff out of life too. Just like sticking to something, and well, ooh, talking about identity.
Oh,
So I feel like a lot of parts about identity. I think I got this from Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I don't
Okay.
know if you've read that, but it's a classic. And he talked about a lot of things are just patterns, which is a very scientific way of look or mathematical way of looking at life of just pattern recognition. Um, but the idea of connecting yourself to reliable patterns, and it kind of goes with identity. So you know you that's what happens whenever people connect themselves to a person, and people are so crazy and potentially unreliable, which is why it's just hard to deal with at times and really connect to them, connect you know yourselves with somebody, um because of all the reasons of you know all trust, vulnerability, blah blah blah. And so whenever that breaks, and let's say somebody cheats on somebody for 30 years, it's like you said, you define your identity as a wife. It's like you connected yourself to this person that behaves has these certain patterns, and now they're gone out of your life, and it's like, oh gosh, like I'm so used to interacting with this. It's like you hear like the hole. You have like having a hole in your life after somebody dies or leaves. It's like, what am I going to do? Like I used to go to this person for this and this and this and this and this. But when you connect yourself to things that stand the test of time, which is why it's like the, there's so many similarities between like the sun and God, like unchanging, always there, building a relationship with God in a way because that's always going to be there. It's a reliable pattern. The moon, reliable. A lot of stuff in nature is reliable. So you're connecting yourself towards things that are a lot more rock solid. Like build your house upon the rock instead of build your house on the sand. You're putting your thing your eggs in not eggs, but you're building your life really on things that are stable. So what that's it's like I that then you don't have to have a problem of like ripping out the foundation because we're just using this building metaphor. And so just connecting yourself towards things that are good, that are consistent, reliable. And that's why I think kind of ties all together. This is a realization, I guess, of okay, well, how does that affect me? How can I be more reliable? How can I be a pattern that is consistent, even though it's a little bit too cerebral, not as emotional. Um, but okay, so I want to be a man of my word. I want to do this. I want to be consistent. I want to be punctual. Okay, that's consistent. If I can be consistent with all these things, I'm building up a reputation of who I am.
Yes.
And so,
Mhm.
but also goes into it's not my job to control people's perceptions of me either, because I feel like I've been guilty of that too. And there's like the first impressions and is all good stuff like that. You want to put your first good for in my case my left foot forward, um, left footed. But
Left hand.
yeah, it's like it's not it's yeah just building up that reputation, and again, that's out of my control, but ultimately the reputation and perception of me from others. But that's the goal, is to strive for that. Is to strive for um, being somebody that's reliable, dependent. And there's so many other aspects of who I want to be to get where I want to be as well. So, but that's like a way to tie it in.
Absolutely. And that made me just think of something that I heard of, if you don't make false promises to your own self. Like, and I love that so much. And even just something like, all right, I'm going to the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then you don't go to the gym on Monday. And then you don't go on Wednesday. And then you don't even trust your own self because you're like, I don't even do what I say I'm going to do. So then, A, how am I going to trust other people? And B, how are other people going to trust me? And I think that figuring out, what are your true values in terms of, what we were just talking about, like reliability, man of your word, and putting that into action is so important. And for me, a big step in that direction was to stop making false promises to myself.
Yeah.
Like,
Mm.
and I try to eliminate it and even being more like, I know we talked about this a little bit, like feeling overcommitted or, to other people, and then being like, all right, well, every yes means a no in a way. Like you can't keep saying yes. You've only got so much room on the plate. And
Inclusivity. You have to shut things out. Say nope.
yeah, every yes is a no. And that's not a sad way or a harsh way of looking at the world. It just is what it is. So then you got to ask yourself, well, what deserves my yeses? And if I say yes to this, what do I have to give up for it? Kind of like the life as a pie chart analogy, or
Oh
I've
yeah.
really been loving the plate analogy lately, just thinking of my life as a plate in a way. And plate's only got so much room, and then it's going to start overflowing. And then you can't get all the stuff that overflows. But I guess it's very similar to the pie chart. I've just been thinking of it as more as a plate. I don't know why. That's the visual I've been working with. But
I feel
um
like I'm slowly starting to turn into like the Tolkien version of an elf, uh where they're like known for never saying anything about the future. Like
yeah.
like never making any promises about the future because they've lived like they're just they just know it's you never know what's gonna happen. So like they'll say yes and no because anything they're
Yes and no.
yeah, just never making promises and um
I To an extent. I mean,
like I
you
just
got
found myself I found myself not making as many commitments like yes. I'm like I'll put it's condition I'll make conditional statements a little bit more if I'm
if this then that.
yeah, if this then that. Um I also like one of the things that I'm not beating myself up about because you can make commitments to yourself and overdo it and have to backtrack, which I'm striving to follow through with things. So, but sometimes I overcommit and I have to just, okay, well, you did too much, you have to cut back. So one of them was me really wanting to learn Spanish. I've cut that out because I just focus on like six different things. But in one of the, I don't remember what tense it was, some type of future tense, but in Spanish it implies a lot more uncertainty
Yes,
with
yes.
it. So it's not like I'm going to do this. It's like I don't know how it works, but it's basically saying like who are you to say that you know what's gonna like that you're gonna guarantee something in the future. Um, which goes to language and stuff like that, which is a fun topic. But yeah.
I totally agree on. Yeah, it's so important. I mean, you got to make some commitments, right? Someone says something, or you got to think about, all right, from this time to this time I'm doing this workout class or whatever. But I've tried to be more, or I just sat down and was like, all right, what do I really need to prioritize in terms of just my whole life? I got to go to work.
Mhm.
That's a given. Got to go to work. Got to make money. All right, I got to sleep. Because sleep is crucial, and I want to age healthily, and I don't want to risk my brain at all. Gotta have time to prepare food, gotta take care of Sirius, and then all these little things start stacking up real fast. And then you're like, all right, how much more of the plate do I have? This is totally the pie chart. It's really not that different. But, it's like, all right, I've got this sliver of the plate. What are we going to fill it with? Because we can't fill it with six different things and each gets, 2%.
Mhm.
Like, because then you're not really committing to anything. I don't think, at least. Like, how can you really, if you were saying, all right, I'll go dancing once a month, maybe it's fun that one night, but are you really going to
Like it's like what? Yeah, some things don't need to be a commitment either. It's like when so I think a lot about with framing, like just framing things in ways of work instead of enjoyment. So like I'm committing to dancing. I'm going to dance 5 times a week, instead of being like, ah, I'm going dancing. I'm going dancing tomorrow. Like that's gonna be, like not always framing everything into a view of commitment, but just enjoyment. I really think is good. And then out of that comes an organic commitment to something that you enjoy.
the
And
synergy between them?
yeah, and the cultivation of not getting burnt out. Like not you're staying in the mindset of fun, enjoyment, and not going too fast, not making decisions too early, and like trying to dive into something that you haven't tested the waters in a little bit. It's
I think
balance, it's
that
balance, but
what I ultimately just have to remind myself of is, most of my, or all of my even ideas about the future and playing around with it, it's all imagination. I don't know what's going to happen. It's totally unknown. So it's imagination to an extent. And sometimes when I frame it like that to kind of intercept those spirals, I'm like, don't let your imagination get the best of you in a way. And that kind of can help me like rein it in a little bit when I start like you don't know where you're going to be in 20 years. Like
mm,
20 years ago you were 3 years old.
I, that's exactly what Jordan Peterson says about like he's like you need to plan roughly 3 to 5 years is about as far as you should go. And he's saying like he's like you're 5 years ago. He's like if 18-year-olds like 5 years ago you were 12. It's like the idea of yeah, you really don't. You can't plan too far ahead. And if you do, it's kind of like you take away some of the fun of life, of like, I'm going to do this, and then kind of shut yourself out of some. I guess it depends on the personality of people, but whatever.
I think, yeah, just trying to live as close to the present as you can. I think the more that you can commit to the present, it actually does help slow time down a little bit. Like, I've been playing around with that a lot since about June, thinking like, in the moments I'm more committed to living and to being present, I'm not like, wow, the day went by so fast. Because I'm mindful and I'm paying attention and I'm aware. I think that's kind of a cool way of, because people are like blink and it goes by, it'll
That's
be.
true. I think that's going to be true regardless if you do present moment stuff.
I think it is true still. Obviously, time does go by fast, but I do think I've noticed like it goes a little bit slower when I'm just not kind of on robot machine mode and just
Mm,
operating and then being like, whoa, it's already Friday.
yeah.
But kind of, I guess, in a summary, uh Robert Frost, one of my favorite writers ever, poets, he's amazing. Nothing gold can stay,
Mm,
beautiful work of art. But then he has this awesome quote and I love it, and he says, in 3 words I can summarize everything I've learned about life: it goes on.
mm.
I love it. It's
This
such
too shall pass.
a powerful, yeah, a little fast. Because even then you're like, wow, like that was 5 years ago. But time is tricky, and you know, I think you just got to work with what you've got and try to experience what you can,
Hmm. Life, interactions, inclusivity, identity,
or lack thereof.
or lack thereof. Yeah. I think that's a good place to end it. Um, Thank you
Cool.
for joining us.
Thank
Um,
you guys.
Over and out.